Things aren't going so well for French President Emmanuel Macron. Now, before I get to what the protests in France were about and how Macron responded to those protests, I want to play for you this 2-minute clip from MSNBC's Morning Joe from June 2017. This gives you a window into how consistently wrong mainstream press is about politics. Watch.
10 years from now, if he does what he's supposed to do, Richard Haas, what do he do? We may look back at Macron and see that he's the most significant French leader on the world stage in a century.
What he's done is extraordinary. First, he won the presidency without a party, and now he's forged a parliamentary majority without a party. And
75 to 80%. He's created 75 to 80% in a country that was just about as staid when it came to political parties as us.
Exactly. It's a political earthquake, and the contrast with Britain, where one of the two established parties, the Tories, George Osborne described Theresa May, the prime minister, as essentially, walking dead. And you've got a limping traditional party there. And in France, suddenly you've got dynamism, you've got energy. The Franco-German axis has dynamism. The future of Europe suddenly seems one with possibility, as opposed to simply defunct. This is an extraordinary development, what's going on in France.
And for the first time in, my gosh, I don't know how long, the French are not following. Right. The French are leading. And there is a possibility of France leading the way toward disruption from the center.
Disruption of the country and of Europe. And it's amazing who he's brought into government. It is really a situation where he said, look, I don't care what party you're part of. I want to bring in, if you will, the best and the brightest from across the political spectrum. We've got to get France working again. This works. I agree. This will have repercussions because it blows a hole in established parties.
And you think about how isolated Angela Merkel was. She could have a new and incredibly powerful at-home ally.
Right.
In
she has that.
absolutely,
and she does now.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy is quickly becoming the center of European politics.
Yeah, he's a little bit unique because he's in the middle. He's not on the left or the right, and he is an outsider. And there is a realignment going on, and he's catching that wave. Whereas Theresa May mispredicted the wave again.
Yeah.
The establishment in the United States mispredicted a wave, and we ended up with Donald Trump. So it's an interesting development.
For every reaction, there is an opposite equal reaction. That is a reaction to Donald Trump. That is a reaction to Brexit. That is a reaction to the populism that we thought was going to sweep across the West. It's having a hard time getting out of the gate.
I'm consistently impressed by how wrong mainstream press is about politics. Now, I'm going to have another example of this insanity at the end of this video, so make sure you stay for that. But I want to, I guess before I break down what's happening in France, let me just go over some of these quotes. I mean, so right now, Macron's approval rating is at 20%. He's not doing well, and I'm going to break that down. But these quotes here, so this is Macron is disruption from the center. When we look back on this in 2 years, we may be incredibly impressed with what Macron has done and want to emulate that elsewhere. I mean, this is insane. They were completely wrong, and this happens all the time. They were wrong about Bernie Sanders. They were wrong about Donald Trump's chances at winning. They were wrong about Hillary Clinton. They are consistently wrong about politics. And look, you could say that maybe they're stupid and just don't know. I think that is definitely a part of it. But it's also that they are in this corporate bubble. I mean, these are people that are millionaires. They have no idea what life is like for the average person. So what they read, who they listen to are other millionaires, other people they know in their circle who write for publications like the New York Times or the Washington Post, or who have shows on MSNBC or CNN, and they listen to them. It's all this big circle, this big bubble of essentially a hive mind. They're all thinking like one, and they're not letting anybody else come in and take out or take down their predictions or their assumptions about politics. So this quote about, oh, when we look back in 2 years, it hasn't even been 2 years. So protests call for Macron's resignation as France comes to the brink of a state of emergency. Now, what started out as a protest against a fuel tax in France has essentially turned into a weeks-long protest against the elite, the wealthy, massive corporations, and Macron in France by the French people. So the French people, both on the right and the left, are pushing back against Emmanuel Macron's policies for the rich. They've even dubbed him the president of the rich. So centrism, this bullshit does not work. Because what ends up happening is they listen to the rich and the powerful. This happens all the time. It happened with Obama. It's happening with Macron. It's happening with Trudeau in many ways in Canada. This is what happens. So there is no... If the center to you is Emmanuel Macron, then that is actual right-wing policy. That is listening to the rich and the powerful, to massive corporations. But again, that is the center in today's politics, and the center, as we have seen, does not work. So this was actually hinted at for several months. So I'm going to read this from The Independent from back in September of this year. Oh, it's a very good government for the rich who are kicking the poor out in the street. It's not a good government for people who are actually working, said Fernand Asso, 60, who sells olives and relishes at the outdoor market squeezed into the little main square of Civray, a town just a few thousand in central France. This area, which had voted socialist before, was among the many that took a chance on the wonderkind former investment banker. Operating outside the established political parties, Mr. Macron swept to power 17 months ago at age 39, imploding France's ossified politics amid a yearning to move the country out of years of economic stagnation. The overwhelming feeling is that Mr. Macron's express train of pro-market reforms, lightening a protective labor code, largely doing away with the wealth tax, ending favored status for the country's railway workers, has so far not improved the lives of ordinary French people. Instead, those in the broad economic and social tiers below the elite complain that they are paying the price as Mr. Macron makes France more capitalist, forsaking traditions of equality and fraternity in favor of the rich. So again, this is what the protests were about. It's protesting against this centrist bullshit, this neoliberalism. So sure, it started out as a protest against a fuel tax, which, look, the fuel tax, there is so much misinformation around this. People think, oh, a fuel tax is just like the carbon tax in Canada or just like a cap and trade system. No, Europe already had a cap and trade system. They've had cap and trade for 13 years. The fuel tax was a tax directly aimed at the poor and the middle class. It's a regressive tax that hurts the poor and the middle class the most. So while the poor and the middle class were being forced to pay for climate change, the wealthy and corporations were getting off. They did not have to sacrifice as much as the poor and the middle class were, or not at all. So that is what the protests were about, is why are we as the poor and the middle class sacrificing, and why are the wealthy getting wealthier? Now, because of these protests, Macron actually at least partially bowed to some of the demands. So this from The Guardian. Macron, elected on a centrist reforming program 18 months ago, said he understood the anger and distress of those struggling to make ends meet at the end of the month, who felt ignored and economically squeezed. Quote, "It is as if they have been forgotten, erased. This is 40 years of malaise that has risen to the surface. It goes back a long way, but it is here now." To help struggling workers, he said the government had been ordered to introduce concrete measures from January 1st, including increasing the minimum wage by €100 a month, overtime would be exempt from tax and social charges, and a planned tax on pensions under €2,000 a month would be cancelled. All employers who can were asked to give workers a tax-free bonus at the end of the year. So Macron, to his credit, at least understood or understands what the problem is, why these protesters were protesting. He understands that, hey, maybe I was squeezing the poor and the middle class a little too much. Now, his response here, I would say, is not enough, and I think the French people would also say it's not enough, but it's at least a step in the right direction. Now, I'm going to show you, just to sort of bookend it here, I started off with some insanity from MSNBC. Let's also end with some insanity from MSNBC. Also, about essentially predictions of Macron from back in 2017 when he was first elected. So I have a couple examples here from Joy Reid. Now, look, Joy Reid is not my focus really of of my takedown here. It's this line of thinking, because I will say at least in the past several months, Joy Reid has appeared to have gotten at least a little better at this. And I really haven't seen her name pop up too much, because I think she's sort of stayed away and has realized that her predictions and her assumptions about politics have largely been wrong over the past few years. So she's gotten better. But that said, she was very wrong about Macron back in 2017. So let me first read this tweet from Joy Reid, who's an MSNBC host, from May 2017. Macron found a way to thread the needle between far-right and far-left populism/socialism. He's culturally liberal, but economically pragmatic. Now, this tweet isn't completely wrong, because he did, in a way, thread the needle between the right and the left in order to win the election. But this shows you that while he is indeed culturally liberal and economically pragmatic, being economically pragmatic is not a way to win favor, is not a way to improve the economy, is not a way to actually help the poor and the middle class. Economic pragmatism is code for obey the rich and ignore the masses. That's what it means. So again, this is a lesson. This is a lesson for people that are thinking, oh, the answer to Donald Trump is to get back to something normal, like a neoliberal, somebody in the center, like a Hillary Clinton or a Barack Obama, somebody that can thread both sides together and everything will be great. No, that's not how it works. You have to actually answer, or you have to actually listen to the poor and the middle class and implement policy that will benefit them. And I'll tell you what, Hillary Clinton, Obama don't have those answers. They've shown us they don't have those answers. They are neoliberals through and through, just like Macron is. Now, let me get to another exchange here involving Joy Reid. So this is a tweet from Luke Savage, staff writer at Jacobin. He correctly points out that instead of Obama endorsing Mélenchon, the progressive that was in the French race, Obama endorsed Macron, who, quoting Cole Stangler of Dissent magazine, wants to roll back state intervention in the economy, cut public sector jobs, and reduce taxes on business and the ultra-rich. He wants to deepen employer-friendly labor reforms, and he backs the current direction of the European Union, viciously hostile to public investment across the continent. All in all, it's a program nearly guaranteed to aggravate the problems at the heart of France's political crisis: unemployment, inequality, and poverty. These are the same forces driving growing numbers of French people to withdraw from politics altogether, or worse yet, cast ballots for the National Front. Now, again, that was back in 2017. This is April 2017. So Cole Stangler here, and by extension Luke Savage, who quoted him, were completely correct. This prediction is completely correct. So, as he says here, the France's political crisis, unemployment, inequality, and poverty, Macron was not going to answer any of those issues. This is predicting the uprising that is happening now in France. Now, remember, this is 2017. Look at how Joy Reid replied to that tweet by Luke Savage. Are you kidding me? Macron is the most viable pro-West, pro-pluralism candidate. Let me guess, you wanted the wool-dyed communist? Again, showing you how wrong these people are, how consistently wrong they are about politics. Now, again, this isn't really just about Joy Reid. This is the bubble these people exist in, whether it's MSNBC, whether it's CNN, whether it's the New York Times, Washington Post. Now, obviously, all of the writers and everyone at these networks don't think alike, but the ones that have the largest platform, the ones that get shared around between their millionaire friends, those are the people that all think alike, the people that all these networks listen to, the ones that they all source when it comes to reporting on these issues. And they are consistently wrong about politics. So what is the answer? I mean, if the center isn't the answer, and obviously Trump isn't the answer, what is the answer? How about Jeremy Corbyn and socialism? So this from The Independent. Jeremy Corbyn tells EU's center-left politicians he wants to build a socialist Europe. Labour leader praises Portuguese left-wing parties for ending austerity and winning electoral success. Now, this is actually, this sort of exposes my mistake here in not covering Portugal's left-wing government. So I am learning more and more about how successful the Portuguese are right now with their left-wing government in ending austerity and actually helping the poor and the middle class. So this is where we should be looking. We should be looking to Jeremy Corbyn, who I think is a future leader in the UK, or is a leader now in terms of leader of the Labour Party, but I think future prime minister in the UK. And we should be looking at Portugal, where they apparently have a very successful left-wing government. So hopefully in the future, I'm going to do a little more coverage on that so we better understand what happened in Portugal and why it's doing so well. But ultimately, the answer is what we haven't tried yet, and that's actual left-wing politics.